Okay, hopefully my last conversation wasn't too waffly and too all over the place, and it's given yourself a better idea of where I'm coming from. It seems to have given me something of that sort. So I suppose in very quick summation, I have to figure out what I am before I can figure out who I am now or who I want to be in the future. Because I think who you are is up for grabs. I think you get to decide, or at least I'm beginning to think that you get to decide who you are. But you have no say necessarily in what you are. To give the body analogy, for want of a better term, I'm 5'11" and walk around at about 84, 5 kg. That's what I am. Now, I could go on a diet and look to reduce my weight, or I could increase the amount of working out that I do, or I could vary it slightly so that I became. Put it this way, I could change my physiology so that I'll be 100 kg. I can't really change my height. I probably could, marginally. I could probably make myself maybe an inch taller by, I don't know, hanging or lying down more often. But for the most part, my height is pretty set. My weight, I can obviously fluctuate that a lot more. Like I fought at 70 kg, so that's 14 kg or nearly 30 pounds lighter than I am now, and I'm by no means, huge either with muscle or fat. I'm normal to look at, I would think. So I could probably have gotten my weight down lower than 70 kilos. So I can affect what I am to a degree, to a small degree, you might say. But I can affect who I am. I was about to say entirely. I don't think that I can do that because I'm going to be limited by what I am. And what I am, what's between my ears, the physical structure of my brain, that affects my personality in a way that my height and weight doesn't. Now, your height and your weight, or your bodily dimensions as opposed to your cranial dimensions, say, your bodily dimensions will have an effect, I would argue, on your personality. Like if you've ever heard of short man syndrome, and again, this is a sweeping generalization, obviously, but short man syndrome is typically associated with a small man, a shorter than average, a much shorter than average, say, man, who has a chip on his shoulder about his size and goes around starting fights with people when they're drunk. That would typically encapsulate, short man syndrome. I don't think there's a female equivalent. There isn't that I'm aware of, at least. But that's just, I suppose, an example of how your bodily dimensions can affect your personality, say. Another one that just springs to mind, thinking out loud, is the happy fat man. Doesn't worry about his or her appearance or what they eat, and just shoves chocolate down their throat all day and turns into a Santa Claus type character. So again, that would be an instance whereby your bodily dimensions would have an effect on your personality. What we consume is another big element, I think, that's rarely spoken about. What we eat will affect our, maybe not our personality as much, and maybe I've been using personality in the wrong context. mood might be a better term. But then again, is personality just mood over time? I don't know. But basically, this is the start. Like this type of conversation that I'm having with myself is the start of sick bag at the ready. My journey into figuring out what and indeed who I am, and I suppose more importantly, who I want to become. Because was it a Popeye that used to say, "I am's what I am," or something to that effect? So I am what I am, for good or bad. I am me. But I certainly don't intend to be the same person in a year's time, or indeed 6 months' time. And I'm certainly not the same person I was a year ago. And I have a disdain for people who say, "Oh, I'm the same as I was 10 years ago." Ha 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 ha. Okay, like to me, that person, and you, in fact, if you are of that opinion, if you think that you haven't changed really, since you were 17 and you're now fucking 25 or 35 or 50 or whatever, or if you're 60 and you think you haven't changed since you were 50, really? You haven't changed in the last number of years? That to me is a fucking sad fact that you would admit. Now, take ownership of it. If it's the case, it's the case. Don't blur the lines or muddy the water or make excuses. Acknowledge the fact that you haven't changed in 6 months or 12 months or 2 or 5 or 10 years. And address it now, because better to address it now than to be willfully ignorant that you haven't grown in any meaningful capacity over whatever duration. So I think these solo podcasts are going to be my effort to understand what I am first in order to understand who I am, so I can therefore dictate who I will be, and for that future version of myself to be something worth aspiring to, if only that made sense. And I think the solo episodes could, can, and possibly should dictate the guests that I have on. So I kind of committed to having a guest on once a week. But I think that was the idea of uploading one every week and having them uploaded on the same day. That was in order to bolster my following, for want of a better term. To get people almost, I suppose, hooked. And to keep them sticky, to use a sales term. You want your customers to be stuck to you. You want your customers to keep coming back to you. You want your customers to almost lean on you, to rely on you, so that if a competitor comes in, they won't just jump ship. And I've got, depending on what way you frame it, the best part of 20 years sales experience. So that has become, for good or for bad, part of certainly who I am, and possibly part of what I am. Or maybe it's maybe what I am or what I have been guided me to become who I am now. But the idea being that I have to get away from that. Like that little pause that I just had there was a time when I would have went back and took that out. Or that I would have actually paused it mid-recording, thought about what it was that I wanted to say, and then hit record again. And it would have been relatively seamless from the viewer's point of view, or listener's point of view, should I say. But what wouldn't be seamless is my own thought process. It might have been seamless from the listener's perspective, but not from my perspective. From my perspective, I'm interrupting myself. Now, pausing it and going back and editing out silences and coughs or whatever it is, that would bode well in order to increase my listenership, for want of a better term. But fuck that, I think the more over the course of the last 6 months since I started this, the more I focused on, I suppose, the people listening, the less I not enjoyed it, but the more work it became. And I don't want this to be work. I want this to be me. I want this to be kind of personal. And you might say to yourself, well, if it's fucking personal and you want it to be all about you and this is a personal journey thing, what the fuck are you doing uploading it? And my answer to that, I think, is for the same reason that I can't just text somebody and go, hey man, fancy coming around and talking to me for maybe 2 or 3 or 4 hours for no reason. Because people will yeah, maybe not. It's weird. But you have a podcast and you invite them on and they're like, they'll say yeah, that's great, and they come on. Or they'll say no and they don't come on. But for the guys who've said no and they don't come on, I might actually reach out to them again and ask them just to meet up with me and have a, off the lead and off the record episode. If I think what they have to say is going to aid me in my journey. So that's why I upload it, I think. Because when you upload it, it becomes a thing. And don't get me wrong, a bit of fucking feedback goes a long way. A good friend of mine and future guest in the show, Tony Webster, who's a psychologist, he reached out to me and mentioned that something that I had mentioned. I'll start from the start there. I mentioned on the podcast before that my newborn daughter, Kiva, I got that, parent feeling of, oh God, is she not breathing? I got that feeling. Anyone with kids, I'm sure, will know that feeling. That, your heart kind of skips a beat and you're like, oh fuck, they're not dead, are they? That must actually sound weird to someone who doesn't have kids, but believe me, ask anyone who has kids, odds are they'll either have felt it themselves or they've heard of someone who will have felt it. But what I had thought in that moment was, don't die on my watch. Not don't die, not oh my God, are you okay, not you poor little thing. No, it was in purely selfish terms. It was, don't die on my watch. Don't die, don't let this be my fault. If almost as if to say, if you want to die, die. Just don't die on my watch. That thought entered my head, and I didn't mean it. It just popped up there. But I could see how somebody would fucking tear themselves apart with guilt over that. And I just mentioned that in the podcast, and my good friend Tony Webster, a psychologist, contacted me and said, thumbs up in the podcast, Frano. And he actually had a term. So in psychologists have a term for what that is. That that concept that you shouldn't punish yourself for just thoughts that pop into your head. I can't remember the terminology that he used, but it's actually a well-known thing in psychology. Say it's a well-known, well-documented phenomenon. Say. And that was great for me to hear that back. So that kind of feedback was great to hear, that this isn't just something that I have encountered. And I think that a lot of the things that I've said have resonated with people because, you know, I'm human and they're human and there is a human condition. We don't all have the same human condition, but there are universals, I think. So getting that little bit of feedback was reassuring in a way. It was just nice to know that something that I had independently discovered, for want of a better term, is an actual documented thing. Now, I haven't gone down that rabbit hole because, look, I'm fucking busy, but I do intend to. So there's just one isolated example of how uploading it has other benefit as opposed to not uploading it. Because, put it this way, I've been having these thoughts and my internal dialogue isn't something I started on the first day of Lent. So I've been thinking in these terms forever, effectively. But I've made more progress since, say, the first day of Lent up until now, which is whatever. This is podcast number 31. I've made more progress in the 31 episodes, which span a 2-month period, than I've had in what? Years and years. And the level of conversation that I'm having with people has just, like, the depth of conversation that I'm having with people on a weekly basis. The depth of those conversations has gone through the fucking roof. And there's been less and less, well, how you getting on? Nanny crack? Yeah. There's been far less of that and far more of, well, Frano, what's the crack? Listen, you were on about something there the other day and, you know, you're off the fucking races, like, and that's class. Because that type of conversation, for me at least, either A, just didn't happen, or B, happened after, 18 pints at a wedding. And there's great benefit in having those drunken conversations with people at 4 in the morning. But the downside of that is, A, you're not going to remember half of it, or I certainly don't. And B, you're going to be hungover. You might have an epiphany, say, at 3 o'clock in the morning, but you spend the next 4 days dying of a hangover, and a lot, if not everything, kind of gets lost in translation. So this idea of uploading it, I suppose in many ways it's like the conversations that I'm having with people on the podcast. The fact that the microphone is in front of you, it changes the dynamic slightly. You're more accountable, but in a good way. And this is the same. I don't have a microphone in front of me. I have the little lavalier mic clipped onto my seatbelt here. Hello. So I don't see it. I'm just driving along, essentially talking to myself like I've been doing for years, because I've done a lot of driving in my time. So I'm quite accustomed at talking to myself out loud, because it's one of the only places, if not the only place, that you can actually get away with it. Because to anybody else looking in at you, it just looks like you're on the phone. And especially when I'm in the car, it's great because it's obviously not as noisy as the van. So that's where I'm at the minute. Trying to figure out myself. And if you want to come along on that journey, you're more than welcome. And I'd be delighted to hear from you. imoffthelead@gmail.com. If you think that I'm heading to a bad place, maybe, let me know. Give me a fucking heads up. If you think that this is going well now, but you see it deteriorating or devolving into something not worthwhile or risky or dangerous, let me know. If you think it's a fucking great idea, let me know why. Like, you know, thank you again to everyone who's emailed me to say, really enjoying the podcast, fair play to you. Like, there's great merit in that. And it gives me a little boost every so often, and it's much appreciated. But what's more appreciated, far more appreciated, with respect, are the people who have contacted me and said that they really like the podcast because of X, Y, and Z. Or, hi Frano, I'm getting up an hour earlier every day and it's been fucking really beneficial. Little things like that. Like, if you're going to contact me, expand on what it is that you want to say. So if you're enjoying it, how are you enjoying it? What are your likes and dislikes about it? What would you like to see? I was about to say, what would you like to see more of? What would you like to see less of? I'm not so sure. I was about to say I'm not so sure how much I care about that, but that would be phrasing it poorly. Because of A, how that might be taken, and B, it's not what I meant. And what I mean, I think, is, by all means, let me know what you'd like to hear more of or less of. But know that I've as it stands, as of today, being whatever it is, the 10th of April, as of today, I think I've made the decision. So I have, as of today, I've made the decision, and my decision may change tomorrow or even later on today, but as it stands, I'm thinking of, I think, going back to what I fucking said on my very first podcast with Beef. Fuck everybody, I'm going to do what I like. And if that resonates with people and they enjoy it, then fucking brilliant. And if no one listens, then who cares? So I think it's kind of back to basics. Back to what I set out originally for. And that takes a lot of pressure off me. That takes off the pressure, this idea of having to upload one, every day or every other day or once a week or at a certain time. I think I'm going to incorporate the podcast into my life. And there's an analogy there, me that loves my analogies, with working out and exercise generally. You really need, I think, certainly for me anyway, without a doubt, you need to incorporate your workout into your life. So you need to start, cycling to work once a week, or I don't know, Tuesday at 11 you do this, or you train every Tuesday and Thursday evening. You have to build it in. You can't just say to yourself, I'm going to go for a run whenever I get the chance, because you're never going to get the chance. You have to make the space. You have to prioritize it. It has to become part of your life. And I think that's what I'm going to do with the podcast, is incorporate it into my life. Now it's very different to the workout. I don't think, or maybe you can. Maybe this is a mental workout. Maybe that's what the solo podcasts are. Basically just a mental workout. And what that has me thinking is, maybe I should sit down to record them at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, or I'll pick my times. The reason that I would have shied away from that is I feel like you should be in the right mind or the right frame of mind to record these solo episodes. And that makes a certain amount of sense. You should only do it when you're in the mood to do it, because if you're not in the mood to do it, you're making yourself do it, and if you make yourself do it, you're not going to enjoy doing it, and it's not going to be as fruitful, and it might just turn you off the whole enterprise. But if it is a mental workout, and it is somewhat perfectly analogous, or if not perfectly analogous, to a physical workout, you'd never say, oh, I'm not going to work out today because I don't really feel like it. You make yourself fucking work out. That's the whole point. You do it regardless. I've never regretted a workout. I never want to, well, not never, but I rarely want to work out. I always make myself, and I'm glad of having done it. And maybe that's key to the solo episodes. Maybe I should, maybe not box myself down to specific times too much, but maybe I should do them when I'm not really in the humour to do them. Now, again, if I was focused on the listener experience, that would be just a terrible idea. But I think that people who will continue to listen to what I upload, I think what I'm struggling to say there is, I think I lose some people that are half interested, and I'll double other people's interest who are half interested, if that makes sense. And I think it's essentially it's quality over quantity. I think that's essentially it. That's not a perfect expression, but the sentiment is there. You know, have fewer more devoted listeners. Not that I'm doing this for the listeners, but I think if I go about this for purely selfish reasons, I don't think I'm going to lose all listeners. It's not as if I don't think I'm going to gain new listeners. I do think that the numbers will reduce. Obviously, I mean, your numbers will increase when you pander to your audience. But that's the fundamental thing that I think, pushing back against. That's what newspapers do. That's what the news does. That's what radio station does. That's what, the media, as we call it, does. They pander to their audience, their existing audience, and their would-be future audience. And it taints everything. And it's monetized. So it's the more people listening, the more money you make, the more what you say is geared towards essentially making more money. And I would sooner have I'd sooner have 100 people giving me €1 a month than have 5,000 likes a month and be earning, a couple of £100 from a sponsor or whatever. So even this has been good, and I think this and the last one should be viewed as more of what's to come, because I found it beneficial. And again, it's going to sound clunky at the minute because I'm only kind of figuring it out, and I think I'm looking forward to having figured out what I'm at and actively going about it. So in relation to prospective guests, I'm going to call out two types of people. My preference is for people who are willing to publish our conversations unedited. So that's my preference. But I'm also keen to talk to people who would like to discuss some issues with me, off the record. Because again, this is, all about me, essentially. I hope that doesn't sound too fucking self-obsessed or egotistical. But again, the reason that I'm making it all about me is if I can control that. Yeah, food for thought. But look, I'm looking for two types of people. I'm looking for people who ideally would be willing to publish it, but I'm also looking for people who would be willing to meet up with me and discuss some issues, just so I can hear different viewpoints and I can have my own views challenged, or I can have topics discussed that I don't know anything about, that I have no opinion on, that I don't know exist, never mind have an opinion on. The idea being that I can get a better handle on who and what I am and what I want to fucking do with my life. Because I was about to say lucky, we'll say lucky for want of a better term, in that I'm inoculated against a lot of the fears that most people have. Given that I run my own business and that I've achieved a lot and I've, blah, 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 I'm kind of comfortable in my own skin. I'm not out to impress anybody, obviously. And I've lost my train of thought. And I'm going to wrap up on that. So look, I'm going to put a call out to not only people who are looking to come on and be broadcast to the world, but also people who don't want to come on. If you like the idea of coming on but don't want to be published, let me know and we'll see if we can arrange to meet up, even for a fucking coffee somewhere, or no mics, no nothing. We can do it at your house, we can do it at mine, we can meet in a pub or a coffee shop or whatever. Again, because I work for myself, I'm fairly flexible. I'll meet up with you, within reason. And we'll take it from there. So thanks again. As always, imoffthelead@gmail.com. And to financially support what I'm doing and light a fire under this, because basically the more funding that I can get this, the quicker there'll be merchandise, the quicker I'll be doing my little off the lead advertising campaign, etc, etc. So thanks for listening, and I'll chat to you soon. If you've been touched by any of the topics covered on the Off the Lead podcast, you can contact Fran directly at imoffthelead@gmail.com. You can also financially contribute at www.patreon.com/offthelead.